Wonderful. Welcome to our Roy Talks as part of our March exhibition. I want to get started by just thanking our sponsors who help us to be able to offer such groundbreaking and innovative installations in our gallery. Ohio Arts Council, Greater Columbus Arts Council, the Columbus Foundation, Crane Group, and Cova Foundation. They help make these Roy Talks possible. So welcome to Noah and Benedict. Thank you both for coming into the gallery today. It's a rare treat for us to have artists together in the same place, so I appreciate that very much. We've been on Zoom so long that it's amazing to see people in the space. So we've spent quite a bit of time together this week, and I've gotten to know you a little bit better and your artwork as well. But for our visitors, let's start with a brief introduction and talk a little bit about the work of yours that's in the exhibition and how you both came together to determine a joint title and the exhibition that viewers will be able to see from March 12th to April 3rd. Benedict, why don't you get us started?
Okay, great. Thanks, Lynette. So I'm Benedict, and just going over kind of what I have within the exhibition. I have 6 pieces. 3 are large paintings made with watercolor, primarily, and featuring a large central void made using black ink. In addition to that, I also have some more sculptural pieces that are made using a silk process, a silk dyeing process that I then sew and kind of integrate with sculptural material from the garden that I grow. And so within both of these forms, I'm really interested in drawing as a line that kind of bounds forms that can then be leaked through as just one of my interests. And like a thing that resonates for me throughout all of it is sort of my meditation practice that fuses into my making practice. So that's a little bit about kind of what I have in the exhibition. And yeah, we can go over title after maybe Noah.
Sure.
Yeah, great.
So my name is Noah Kashiani. I have 7 pieces in this exhibition, all of them relating from items that I've gathered from thrift stores around Chicago, which is where my practice is based. So what I'm trying to do is take these unwanted or discarded items and flip them into something, a piece of nice fine art. So essentially, my practice is rooted in late capitalism, pointing out the atrocities and absurdities of how much objects we have, the amount of clothing. So that's evident when I go to the thrift store. So in each of these sculptures, I try to turn the old stuff into, a seductive or more interesting sculpture. So we can talk about the title a little bit.
Oh yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm.
So it was tough for us to come up with a title because, sometimes bringing 2 things together is not always the easiest. We came up with the name Desert River. I got the inspiration for, suggesting the name from the concept. I think a lot about, giving into, your indulgences. So relating to the topic of, thinking about the Garden of Eden and how the river acts as the vehicle to and from, and how the serpent who allegedly offered, the fruit to Adam and Eve, that's the vehicle to the garden. And it's also kind of like an oasis within a dry, arid climate. So it acts as something that you not only need, but it can kind of push you further into something that you like too much of what you need.
Mm.
And then Benedict has a lot of things that could relate to the title as well, because he often his work is rooted in nature. I'll let you go ahead and.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I got excited about that title suggestion. One, for its nature connection, but also kind of in this dichotomy of sort of this like arid, barren landscape being paired with sort of like this liquid life force that's like traversing the landscape and ending up in that oasis that Noah mentioned. And as I am making work, I'm thinking a lot about mindfulness and also just like balance and that for me is like emotional balance, like some form of like, still hard to define, but a spiritual balance as well. And so for me, I like that metaphor as like as a process, or as following this river or encountering this river, you have the option to follow it towards its destination, or you can essentially like get distracted or get plopped into just where you are in that present moment. So there's this urge to continue moving, contradicting this urge to also be like staying in one spot, if that kind of makes sense. It's a little scattered, but yeah.
It does. I love the dichotomy of that, and particularly as I feel like it relates to your work also, those two disparate images, but really the same, as in getting back to basics, getting back to what's important, not thinking about more stuff, but also being literally rooted in the earth and growing things as part of your practice. So it's a very interesting title. I'll be curious to see what people who come into the gallery think about it too, and those will be, I think, some really wonderful discussions. Your work, you applied for our juried exhibition separately, and the jurors put your work together. And I think we had lots of discussions as we were installing the work, you know, how it plays off of each other, the colors, the themes, the textures, and those kinds of things. What kinds of things did you discover about your own work and maybe about each other's work while you were installing?
Yeah, I can dig into that.
Go for it. I have some too, but I'll let you start off. We'll kind of just.
Well, installing has been exciting as a process for me personally, in the sense that this space is like the first opportunity that I've been able to see some of my work up. My studio's in a garage that's kind of cluttered and doesn't have a lot of great wall space or floor space for that matter. Things will get incredibly dirty. So just being able to see the work up for the first time has been really exciting. And in that process, I think that one thing that has been interesting as our works have collided has been this sort of relationship between the paintings that I have on the wall, as I see in relationship to these objects. And so I'm always interested in how those two forms of making can relate to each other. And so thinking about the paintings as sort of these theaters, as I refer to them, they're really spiritual theaters of like performances that are happening within the garden that have to do with ritual connection, those sort of ideas. And as the objects sort of came about, the ones that I brought into the space, but also Noah's, I feel like they sort of became artifacts, or yeah, I guess artifacts is a good word, that potentially come from this world that's being described in the imagery that is on the wall, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Great. Noah?
Yeah, I can say that what connects them for me is also the element of them being artifacts, because if you look at the scope of, you know, how long humans have been around versus, you know, art being around versus, you know, modern art, you know, into contemporary art, and the correlation of the objects that have existed in the world, things are constantly changing. And when you look into the future, you'll be able to look back at what's being presented, these, you know, fossils of belts that I use, or fossils of purses that I've put together, coming with these silk tapestries that are hung with gold chains. You know, those are things that can only exist in the present, and I think that's why it's so, you know, the work is so evoking, because they both have a feeling of, you know, sensation. They kind of like takes you over a little bit, and together they bounce off so well, just formally and with the colors. And I think it's really just kind of rooted in the same. It's in process. I mean, I have a lot of process to my work. It starts in the thrift store, and then I manipulate it, and then I paint it, and then I flock it, and then I do other things to it. So I think it's just ritual and process. It's all part of being an artist, and luckily artists kind of pair together seamlessly.
Yeah, that was a really fulfilling process, actually, because the jurors, several of them were very interested in doing that, so almost curating shows for us for the season. So it was really great to have those conversations, and jurors who saw relationships between work and things. So, so far so good. They've done a great job so far this year, so I'm excited to see other shows as well. So you talked a little bit about seeing your work in a space, Benedict, and so I'm kind of curious about where else your work has been displayed and how Roy was one part of this journey of yours to exhibition and to taking those next steps as emerging artists.
I can start off. So I had been following Roy for a little bit now. I've seen some other artists that were adjacent showing work here, and it looked like an excellent opportunity to showcase my work because I have really just been making a ton of things within the past year, and I want to, get the word out. And I'm from Ohio. I have a lot of family here, and I like to build connections with artist communities, especially spreading them, in places that you might not, have a large, huge art scene. So, and I wanted to connect my roots to it, being from Ohio. But being a beautiful space and being so fortunate to be paired with Benedict, I've been very excited about it, and I'm really happy to make it happen.
Great.
Cool. Yeah, in terms of Roy G. Biv in my trajectory as a career artist, I mean, it's a beautiful space, it's a beautiful gallery, it has a history within Columbus where I've lived for the past 4 years, and so it's been really awesome to be able to come here and see shows where they are really putting artists together in a space as a means of exchanging ideas and information and aesthetics and all of that. So that's just been exciting in and of itself. I think for me also, I really was looking for a space where I could be able to, where I could explore painting and drawing more in depth. I originally started making work as a photographer, and so have shifted into multidisciplinary, but right now my practice is primarily devoted to painting and drawing in multiple forms, whether that's sculptural, or whether that's on the wall. And so for me, this was a really exciting opportunity to really devote time into those processes specifically. And it's been a challenge and it's been really exciting. And yeah, I think one of the great things about exhibiting in a community that I'm from as well is that I get to share it with a lot of people who I am already in dialogue with about my practice. And I think that's really fruitful and exciting, and also just, yeah, really fun. I've had a really great time, and it's been wonderful meeting Noah and Lynette. And yeah.
Great. And a larger scale, I'm curious about how your practice and colleagues' practices make up the tapestry, if you will, of the arts community. So for you, what is the community of artists like, both where you are now and where you have been, and maybe even recognizing how far we have come in Columbus to embrace the arts. And I don't know, if you travel, if you have experiences elsewhere and what the art scene is like there, or the art community is like in other places. In Columbus, it tends to be very, I think, collaborative. We all, chat with each other, see each other's shows, go to different places, and it's a community of collaborators. And I wonder if that's unique to Columbus or if you've had those experiences in other places as well. What's it like in Chicago?
I would say it's, a lot of people will get together to collaborate and make, artist projects, artist run spaces. But what's unique about Columbus is, and this space particularly, is you guys have, a great space and great funding. I mean, it's very uncommon for a gallery to be even a third of the size that I would potentially be, showing in Chicago. So these beautiful windows and the funding and the support this gallery gets from, more so the community, it seems like it's happening a lot more in these up and coming neighborhoods in Columbus. So I really think there's something special about this little oasis of culture within the Midwest.
Yeah, Columbus I think is a really incredible location for the arts. One, because it has its own bubbling scene,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, it's also located within the reach of a lot of other great art communities, like Chicago, New York's not too far away, Philly, like that whole range, which I think is really awesome. While the cost of living here is like something that is affordable for me, like fresh out of graduate school. And so I actually went to grad school at OSU and graduated last year, and didn't feel like I was super well integrated into like the Columbus community of making, to be quite honest. I was kind of insular in my bubble, but now that I'm living here out of school, despite COVID, I'm trying to like branch out, and get more involved. And I think one thing that's exciting to me is like I now personally just feel more liberated to pursue independent projects, and seeking out like people within this community to connect with. And for me, a lot of that actually stems from social media, just like following other artists in the area, getting excited, going to shows, connecting with people in that capacity. And so within that, like I'm excited about Columbus as an art space, and I definitely agree that there's like a sense of collaboration happening. I know there's like lots of little art projects that are popping up in the past that have some still sustained. I have some friends who are starting a small gallery space, or have started a small gallery space. So yeah, there's a lot of potential, a lot of opportunity, and yeah, it's a great city for being a maker, I think.
I think so too. I'm curious about Columbus, of course, but the things that we're doing here, what things are you doing beyond exhibitions in galleries? Are you pursuing any other endeavors, collaborating with other disciplines, traveling? Although, in the before times we did that. Now I'm hoping that we'll be able to do that again. But, other opportunities, residencies, writings, things like that. What's on the horizon? What are you working on next?
So I'm just, continuing to make work and show it in any capacity that I can. I have a few shows coming up this year. I actually have another solo show in Columbus in October at 934 Gallery. And then I have a few other things on the horizon. And my studio is in an artist space in Chicago. We're just trying to make like a nice studio space for artists to produce their work. We have a resident right now who's wrapping up her residency. Since we don't do shows really during COVID, we allowed an artist to like rent out our space and make work, and then they will present a solo show at the end. So going forward, we're going to try to get back in the swing of hosting exhibitions and providing good places for artists to work. We've got a wood shop in there, a large outdoor space. But that's kind of my projects as of late. It's refurbished, or not refurbished, it's an old funeral home. So there's like a big, open wood floor area which we use as the gallery, big basement with the body ramp going up. So it's a pretty unique space. I enjoy working there.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But it's fun because it's like kind of like a think tank of artists. I have like a lot of other good artists that work there, and it became kind of, collaborative and talk. We're going to start doing critique nights for people to get involved, just to get things going.
That's great. That's so important. I know those are some things that we've been able to do at Roy, but now we've backed off of some of those things, critiques, and I don't know how you all are finding creating and energy and inspiration for creating, because you're isolated if you're not making an effort to have a critique or to work collaboratively with other artists. So how has working collaboratively with other artists, but also how has working in isolation influenced your work?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like my practice has shifted a lot since being in like quarantine and COVID. And so I think that one thing that I typically do if I feel like I'm in a rut of some capacity is I just explore a new way of making. And so all the silk work that is in this has been a process that I had to teach myself how to do in the past 4 months. So that's been kind of an evolution within my practice as a result of quarantine. But in addition to that, I'm also getting more into the the idea of creating publications and being able to bring that to bring art into people's homes. So I had an exhibition recently in Tennessee where like there wasn't going to be that many people who were able to come see the show because people are isolating. And so as a result of that, I'm working with the other artists that I showed with, and we made a collaborative zine, and we're working to get that printed and published and sent out to people, just as another way of sharing. And that has been actually a really exciting thing in my practice because I've never really designed any sort of print before. And it is super engaging. It's like a great way of putting down a variety of thoughts, and it's just as opening up opening up possibility for collaboration again. Like I have ideas percolating where I want to bring people in. And so yeah, I feel like I'm not sure if I'm getting to the question exactly, but yeah, that's kind of where my brain's at with that. So
That's good. Yeah, I think, there is innovation in distress, right? We've had to discover new ways of doing things if we didn't have access to spaces or access to materials. How has that changed and helped you to grow as an artist? Sure, it has. I mean, you've had to learn new skills or explore new avenues. So what's next for your art? Where do you see your art going from here? Not just, where you'll be exhibiting it, but in terms of making and practices. Are there some things that you've discovered that will help you moving forward?
So like I have this thing with my conscience that when I don't make art, I start to feel guilty. I think a lot of people have that issue, maybe some don't, but I try to make as much as I can, and like going forward, I think I want to relinquish those burdens because you make like making art. To make art, you have to gather inspiration and do things. You don't have to necessarily be in the studio 24/7. And I think for me, I'm going to make sure I set time aside to bubble ideas and really understand my interests. I mean, I think what I do a good job of being an artist is like becoming primitive, like almost like a child, because you really have to tune into the most basic things that you're interested in, because that makes it the most authentic representation of yourself and your work. So I'm just trying to really get down to my true spirit, because I think that'll just like that's the easiest way to make stuff. If you don't have anything to expel, you're just no point in forcing anything.
Yeah, that's true. If you're giving all the time and creating all the time and putting things out there all the time, what are things that you bring back to yourself to create that balance and inspire you to create other work? That's one of the things about this exhibition, that, beyond your work, we're also working with some local creatives on adding color to their diet, to their exercise routine. But really, we thought of March as being a really wonderful opportunity to sort of, think forward. The weather is getting better, but we're needing to think about a work-life balance. I think certainly something that we've learned in quarantine is, what's important and what isn't important, and how to take good care of ourselves. So I know you spoke earlier, Benedict, about meditation as being part of your practice and your art practice too.
Yeah, and that really took off during COVID for me. And it's been something that has been in and out of my life for a few years, just thinking about like mental health and like processing through all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, since I've kind of really instilled that as like a more fundamental, just like part of my everyday, it's really been expansive for me. And I see myself slowing down in how I'm making, and just having a greater trust in like the moves that I'm making within the studio. And so as I'm like moving forward, I just kind of want to keep doing that. I'm lucky that I have like a somewhat steady income right now. I'm not like making like an incredible amount of money by any means. But yeah, just like digging into like the simple pleasures of what's attainable to me. And so meditation is one of those things that I think is really balancing, but also as like spring is coming, I'm super psyched to get back into the garden and just grow a lot of flowers. And that to me, like if I can in a day have like like time to like meditate and journal, time to be outside in the garden, and time to be in the studio. Those three things I think weave in and out of each other, inform each other and create a greater balance. So just kind of strengthening that, and also like sharing that with people, whether that's like, I don't know, giving my art to friends, giving people flowers, which is like one of the sweetest things someone can do, I think. But yeah, anyways, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So within your own communities of artists and collaborators, what are some of the things that you've been able to, receive from your collaborators, and what are some of the things that you've been able to offer your collaborators?
Yeah, good question.
I just get a lot of inspiration from different artists and new artists, and anytime I can meet someone, whether it's anyone at Roy, Lynette, or Benedict, or any other artist in Columbus, any new artist that comes to the space that I work at, it's just a good opportunity for me to learn about another layer of the art world. And I think for me, I'm just trying to get as much knowledge of what's going on, and it's very satisfying to me to know that I can add that person's spirit to my collection, essentially. Like, I feel like once I get, because the art is it's such psychology of yourself, and not everybody makes art, so when you meet an artist, it's a lot easier to understand someone almost quicker, I guess.
Sure.
So I just feel like I'm very fortunate because of that, and that's really what I want going forward when my collaborators.
Yeah, and it's invigorating. I think it's hard to, in my experience, to be a maker, because there's a lot of doubt involved in that. You're putting something out that may or may not be appreciated by other people, and isn't necessarily going to be lucrative in any capacity. So for me, being able to collaborate and meet with other people kind of in that vein of like sensing like a similar spirit of somebody is invigorating and just really encouraging. And it's like, there is a lot, like there are moments where it's like, yeah, what am I doing here? But to know that like there's a community of people asking that question within their making and pushing forward to continue producing is like really, yeah, it's a really, really sweet and generous part about being in the company of other makers.
Yeah, I think that theme also runs through this exhibition. So maybe we can talk a little bit about what the viewer will experience when they come here, because your work is complementary. Sometimes there's a really wonderful dialogue between your works, and I was witness to the process of how you determined what would be shown where. Maybe we can talk a little bit about your intentions behind this exhibition.
So, actually carrying off of what you're talking about of, understanding and being able to put your art there out as an artist, in relation to this exhibition, that's kind of like the underlying theme of my thesis a little bit, is that, like if you want to indulge in your behaviors, or if you want to, live your life a certain way, you have the, ability to do whatever you want in this world. You really can. And I think what I'm touching on, and a lot of these things are kind of these pressures we feel domestically, whether it's to, get a house, own a house, get married, have children, live a certain way. I think all these things, we get further away from, actually, being ourselves, which isn't, that's a subjective statement, because you need, reproduction, you need relationships for, this world to evolve, but it's kind of the, understanding at where we are at this point in the world. There's a lot more people, things are completely different than back in the day. We don't need to all have children. We don't need to rush into a relationship for that financial support. And I'm kind of just throwing out, the normalities of what people expect out of you. And I think it's about consciousness, ultimately, is where I think Benedict and I have an underlying similarity. Is about being like understanding what's happening with you and where you're at.
Totally, yeah, and kind of latching onto that a little bit, thinking like a thread that runs deeply through my practice is sensation. I'm really interested in sensation as like a really powerful force, capable of like immense, like, for lack of a better word, I feel like healing gets a little hokey sometimes, but I think that's really how I feel about it.
Yeah.
And sensation in that way for me is just like tapping into environment and being aware, as opposed to like feeling something and having no understanding that's even happening in your body or to your body. So thinking about consciousness in that form, I think that we have like an attention to what Noah is mentioning in terms of the ideas of like mindfulness and the subconscious and how those things are at play. And I think visually, like kind of thinking, like branching a little bit into the other part of your question about how the space was organized. I think that one thing that has been really exciting to see are these moments of shape for me. One specifically, shape and color. So like the black void, which appears in a lot of my work, attached to sort of like these like rich, deep, like singular monocolored works of Noah's, in addition to other works as well. So thinking about how those things can pull elements out of each other has been one point of working through the space together. And also just thinking about, I guess I view the space as like a gradient of color now at this point, where we have color relationships happening throughout the space that are very intentional and hopefully will carry people through, maybe like a river, I don't know.
Stop. I see what you did there. Yeah, for me, it's always interesting because we change shows every month. So each exhibition, artists interpret the space differently. And it's very exciting to see what Roy is capable of, right? And so, moving the walls to open up the space and to have this flow of color and form throughout the space is really, really interesting to me.
Yeah, like aesthetically, piecing these together was it was actually pretty easy.
Surprisingly, it came together really well.
Yeah, I mean, you have some watercolors and drawings, but we're both working in like fabrics, textiles, and like the colors are very similar. And I think just the materiality of it, like we've got dirt, we've got crystals, we've got fibers. It's very organic feeling. So it was pretty seamless.
Yeah, I think about like those elements as like sort of like this residue. And going back to like your conversation earlier about like going into like thrift stores and kind of picking up these like almost like remnants of like life, right? Like that is something that's happening within our work. I'm pulling remnants and residue specifically from the garden in a lot of cases and merging them with these other elements that I'm creating. And I think that that's an interesting link between our processes as well, like that culling or pulling from like our daily lives and reality and repurposing them and seeing what is there.
It's funny, like I actually learn. I mean, every time you do an exhibition, every time you put your art into a vulnerable position, you learn so much about yourself. And not only showing is a vulnerable position, but pairing yourself with another artist is very vulnerable as well. So it's so beneficial in so many ways, and just like I couldn't be more excited and thankful for the opportunity because I've learned a lot just through talking with Benedict right now too. I've learned even more so about my work, so it's been great.
That's great. Well, Roy plays a small part in that, and we're very excited about that, just creating a safe space where artists can be collaborative, communicative with each other. So it's intuitive, of course, for us to do that, but it's wonderful to hear that it's received in that way. So, yeah, great. Well, this has been a really wonderful conversation. We covered a lot of ground, a lot of subjects. Is there something that you wanted to talk about that we haven't covered yet, something that you want to bring up?
wish we had, wish we could do another exhibition in the future.
Yeah,
see
that's
how
good.
far it grows. But yeah, just excited to see how it's received, really, and I hope the audience is appreciative.
Yeah, and yeah, I echo those sentiments, and yeah, feel really grateful to have the opportunity through Roy G. Bev, and it's been wonderful collaborating with Noah in this context, and also with Lynette. And I would say, yeah, I think that this exhibition, like one thing that we really focused on was making sure that things have enough space. Because we really hope that people do come in and like have a meander through. It's not a quick run through, which is maybe all art, but yeah, just taking a moment to sit with the works. And for me personally, that looks like letting your eyes like rest within these like central void dark elements. But I think that can translate to all of the work within the space. And so yeah, I'm just excited to share, excited to have the opportunity, and yeah, it's going to be a great show. I hope that people will come out to see it.
I hope so too. So we'll post this interview on our YouTube channel and encourage people then to find their way to asking some questions that you all will respond to during our Q&A tomorrow at 2:30. And we'll be doing that via Zoom, and the link for that is in the comments below. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Noah. Thank you, Benedict.
Thank you.